All right, I am live. What's going on? This is technically the first show of the new year, but we got some wires crossed, and I didn't know we weren't supposed to be doing this show. So it's only me right now, unless a couple people jump in. I'm completely unprepared for this, and so we're gonna wing it and see what happens. Hopefully, I don't get yelled at by any of the big boss men. Um, My name is Renee Rabbit. This is the Chief Experts Designer Show. Dan Bowman, if somehow he shows up, that's amazing. He wasn't supposed to. This show was supposed to be canceled, but I didn't know that, and so it's on our Facebook groups that this is going on. So I only jumped in here just to appease the few people that might come in from the Facebook group events page, and I'm just going to share some tips and tricks about Chief Architect. Is all I'm going to do on this show, and I'll come up with some stuff on the fly. But if you have some questions, if you're joining the show and you've got something you want me to show you and get into, I'm happy to do that. Oftentimes in this show, we are kind of in that beginner, intermediate to upper intermediate range of the kind of tips and tricks that we show you. When we teach classes in person, I handle the power users, advanced users. So if you think you're an advanced user and you want to see some advanced user things, you got a question in particular that you want to talk about, maybe some crazy kind of schedule stuff you want to do, or cabinet manipulation, symbol manipulation, that kind of thing, let me know in the comments, and I'm going to do my best to try to cover all this. This is really challenging to moderate comments and also present at the same time, so bear with me. It's going to be a funny little show. And then I've just kicked it on, so we've got comments on the stage, so you'll see that. Right now we've only got one viewer, so I'm talking to a blank audience. But let's see if I can't get into this. I'm going to figure out how to share my screen real quick. And you should be seeing an ultra wide screen. Sorry about that. That's all we got to deal with today. And I'm hoping everybody can hear me as well. And look, there we go. We've got an audience member commenting. Cool. So what can I go over? I'm thinking the first thing that I'll go over is something that I was going to keep and reserve for my membership of my paywall of YouTube, but why not? I don't have anything else to talk about, so let's show you something cool that I would usually reserve for a special audience. And so I'm going to get in and just start a little template here. I'm going to show you something. My templates, the way I build them out, this is, I guess it's sort of a shameless plug, but the way I build out my templates, and one of the really impactful things that you can do in X17 is you can make it so that your plan file, a base plan file, is already being sent to a bunch of different sheet sizes automatically, so that when you start drawing, those different layouts are being populated. So you can have different layouts for different builders, if you will. You can have different layouts for different scopes if you want to. And it may seem a little bit complex, but all you would need to do to get there is build out a project. And then when you're done with that project, I want you to gut that project. And then you can figure out how to save this as what I would call a template project, keeping in mind that it's not technically a template. We will never be going to a file menu to access this. We would just be going to our project browser and then copying a project that's already built out, where we have a plan file being sent to multiple different layouts. Now that's in a very advanced realm of figuring that out, but I just wanted to lead you down that path because I just had a training call where a gentleman was discussing, how can I automate? How can I kind of make it so that I'm doing less work? This is one of those ways, because what they were doing was having to come up with a lot of different, they were still using default sets, and they were using default sets to drive one layout so that they could print a build set for their builders, more like an instruction set to them versus their permit set versus some kind of design review set. And instead of using one layout and a bunch of different, complex default sets that you have to flip for every view, he could have just been creating additional cameras, allocated on different layers, and then being sent to different layouts. So This is kind of an example of what I've got going here. So I'm just going to actually make a copy of my base template plan because I want to mess around here. And then what I want to go over today, unless I get some different new comments, is I'm just going to mess around with showing you how you can create a parapet builder pretty quickly so that we just get to do a one-click action to create a parapet that might even give us the correct details if we were to pull a cross-section camera. And so I want to show you how to do that. And then every once in a while, I'm going to have to take a pause and take a look at comments and see what people are saying and try to respond to you as well. Unless I get some help in here. So I'm just going to start with a really simple 4-wall room here. And then if you're on a Windows machine, I always like to mention this. I think it's such a huge tip is I'm going to use what are called mnemonic keys, and I'll just take a second to explain what those are. Mnemonic keys, unfortunately, we don't have this on Mac, and we've never been able to create a workaround on Mac, not to the extent that it works on a PC. And so mnemonic keys are when I tap my Alt key, I want you to see my cursor up here. You see the top menu items up here. When I tap my Alt key, just tap it. Don't move your mouse anymore. Hands off your keyboard. Excuse me, hands off your mouse. When you have your hands off your mouse, you tap your Alt key. Notice that all the menu items on a PC are underlined here. We've got single letter underlined words. So that if I want to build a second floor very, very quickly without ever even touching my mouse, I could go Alt B for build, O for floor, and I could just hit enter right now, or I could hit N for build new floor. I'm just going to hit enter, and then I know if I hit enter twice more, it's just going to copy basically the same configuration from one floor to the next, and now I have a second floor. Isn't that cool? So then the next thing, what do we do here? We want to basically set this room up so that it's got no roof over this room, right? So you can come in here in the structure, say that it's no roof over this room, and we'll press OK. And then the next part of this is just kind of setting up these walls. Now, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I already have a tool that builds a parapet. I just want to show you how simple this is. Let me go ahead and pull a perspective overview here, and I'm going to get into my library. But I want to recreate this, and I'm going to probably do a better job this time around. Here we go. I've got a little parapet built here. So if I just spray this room, look what happens. A couple things happen that might be interesting. One is we've got a cap, and two is that we've got some kind of cant in the base here. And then three is you can see that there's some new texture being applied to all the walls and the floor. This is what's called a style palette, all right? And it's a room style palette. So it's saving some configurations about the room, and then it's applying that as a single click action so that I get to just target a room. We could do this in 3D or we could do this in 2D. The same effect would happen if I just back out one, we can see, the previous room, no cap, no wall cap, etc. Now, if I go here and I'm in the second floor and I've got that tool active, you can see this is our scope tools right here in our edit menu. My edit menu is floating in the screen. I just get to hover over this. That's my highlight color right there. Hover over this, click, and you're going to see this updates. Okay, so it works either in a 2D plan view or it works in a 3D view as well. So the next thing is I want to make this a little bit more detailed and save this back as a new style palette. And so what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to actually, maybe it makes sense to pull a little cross section, backclick cross section, just so we can see what this is looking like currently. And then I have a parapet detail here that I could work off of. Okay. And so maybe I might recreate this from these different moldings here. And so we can see what was happening here. There's just one simple molding in here. Well, we want to make this a little bit more complex. I might even make it so that we're creating all of these different moldings and applying it in that style palette tool. And I think we could do that pretty quickly for the most part. All right. Now, I'm not sure how interesting it is to see me draw all these individually. But given that this is just a CAD block detail, and I'm going to make sure that all these are set to a default layer. If you didn't know this, when I unblock, everything that is in that block is currently selected, so that I could go here if I wanted to and conform the layer just by changing. This minus sign indicates that some of the layers that are selected right now are default and some are not. And if I were to just click this once, it's going to put a check mark there. Now it's going to put that to that CAD default layer. And so now I just know that I'm displaying that in my current layer set. All right. Next up is, it looks like I already have these moldings created. Now the scale of this is wrong, so I might want to like sit here and mess around with the scale to try to get it to a uniform scale. Now, I do believe that I started drawing this, and I think it might be interesting for you to not sit here and watch me draw a bunch of moldings, but instead kind of power through it and explain the overall goal here. So let me see here. I've got I think I have a series of moldings here in something that I'm called to sort. Let's see if we can find it real quick. Talks amongst yourselves. And hopefully you guys can hear me okay. Let me know if you can't. Well, I was really hoping I had these moldings already drawn, because that would have been awesome. Would have seemed like I planned this whole thing all along. Okay, I do have it. So here's what I'm going to do. I have these moldings in my catalog. This would have been a lot easier if I just typed in mold. Let's just see what I'm typing here. Molding, and you can limit your search to a specific type. If you come down here and if you see this icon, this is saying, hey, I only want to see moldings, okay? And then I can go find my sort section here, and we can see that I started drawing these. I was just prepping for a video I was going to do about this. Okay, someone said the audio is great. Now, if you didn't know this, you can always modify a molding profile by right-clicking in your library and saying place molding profile. This will place this as a CAD block, okay? So we can see what's happening here. So there is a cant flashing. I'm going to do the same thing with this counter flash just to see what this is looking like. Okay. So we can see this is going to line kind of like this. Sure. Right. Here's our cap flashing. That's going to go at the top. So again, if I didn't put place molding, it thinks I'm just trying to draw a molding right now. It would draw a molding line if there was a snappable point it could work from, right? Which is a little bit more difficult in a cross-section view. And so here we go, place molding profile. Just get to click and place, cap flashing angle. Let's place that molding profile. This one goes over the top of the first one. Now here's the real big trick that I was going to implement for this particular detail. There is no way to get a 2x4 that has, that's been chamfered like this, that's been cut down like this and angled like this. So I did think maybe it would be interesting if I made my own molding profile to just look like that 2x4, because the only time we're going to see it is in a cross-section view. So what happens if I just drew this out? Let's see how I drew this real quick. That's simple enough. This is a disconnected molding profile. You see there's a little gap here, which doesn't bother me all that much. Once we turn line weights on, that just looks like a cut down 2x4. So that works pretty well. So it looks like I have all these drawn. What's the next step? Now we got to figure out how we can align all this. And there's some complications and some tricks to this that can be a little bit challenging. So let me get into this room designation. So I'm going to select the room, open it up. I'm going to get into the moldings section here. We can see, we've got some moldings in here that we're going to replace. And I'm doing this on the fly. This is not practice, so I'm going to screw up a little bit probably. All right, so now I can get into where I've got these flashings. Should be easy enough to just start by just loading these in, I would say. And it's going to pick up, it's automatically understood that was some kind of base molding. It's not going to understand that this is a base molding. It thinks it's a crown molding. That's okay. We're just going to set this to base molding. You just do that in the type section. I want you to notice this, base molding, okay? If we just left it blank, who knows? If you set it to crown, what happens? When we set it to crown, it's going to place a check mark in here to top, all right? And so when we get a preview of this, we're going to see that, here we go. This is how it's placing, to top. If we unchecked to top, look what happens. It's referencing the bottom, okay? It's still being designated as a crown molding, but it changes kind of its origin point, all right? So this one actually is going to be a base molding, and then we're going to change some offset. Now, another thing happens when you change the type classification. I want you to see this. Notice our preview. It's just showing this molding. That's because no other moldings are classified as crown right now, okay? Now, if I were to change this back to base molding, notice something. We see our cant flashing here. Why is that? These are both classified as base moldings. So this is a way that you can see how these are interacting with one another, all right? And so then if I change some kind of vertical offset for this, let's just say, I'm going to say that I'm doing a vertical offset of maybe about 6 inches or something. I didn't take any dimensions here, but look at that. Now we can see how this is working together. Pretty cool. All right. Now, this is not going to be a perfect flashing setup for one very specific reason. We aren't using what are called 3D moldings, okay? We're not using a molding profile that was generated from a 3D symbol. There is a benefit to doing that for this particular molding. When you draw a 2D CAD symbol and convert that to a molding, it cannot be stretched in any axis, separate from just being uniformly stretched just by resizing it, okay? So we can't make this be, this upper portion here be taller without it just being skewed in every which direction uniformly, okay? If instead I were to have converted this to a solid that was maybe 12 inches long, and then from there converted it to a molding, then I get the option to put in a stretch plane. And if we know about symbols and how stretch planes work, we know that we could put a stretch plane 4 inches up in the Z here. And what that would do is it would create a uniform cutting plane so that if we resize the symbol's height, it would stretch by just duplicating the geometry around where that stretch plane created a cut line, okay? And so that would make it so that we could change the height of this based on the height of our parapet wall. Very cool. Maybe if we've got some time, I could show how that all works. All right, so let's get into that next molding here. And notice I numbered them. That was just to make it very easy for me to go through here one by one and just put these in place. You can obviously rename them after the fact, and that would be just fine. So here's my cap flashing. Let me put this in. And so this one is going to be crowned, so I'm going to leave that the way it is right now. We are going to need some kind of a negative offset, right? But I'm going to leave this for right now, and we'll get to why in just a minute. Let me go to the next one, just loading these up, and I'm going to use the angle. Notice that I have one that's straight and one that's angled. So I'm going to use the one that's angled, right? And this thinks it's a chair rail because we've already got a crown molding. I want to make sure that it's set to crown mold. So now we can see how it's, orienting itself compared to that other cap flashing there. Okay. And last, definitely not least, my wedge block is also going to be a crown molding. Okay. Now, how do we get these caps up above my wall assembly, right? Where they need to be. In particular, that wedge block. So I can set this, I unchecked that to top, and we can see now, that moved that changed its reference point, all right? And so, but I still need this to go up a little ways because it needs to sit up above my wall here, right? Right now it's sitting just below my wall. It needs to be up above, especially if I want that cross-section cut to be perfect. So here's what I want to do. I want to create a vertical offset, right? So I'm going to say, hey, I want this 3 inches vertical offset. Well, look at this. Chief Architect decided at some point that we're going to flip what the offset is based on what we're working with. I still find this to be very, very confusing. It's not quite intuitive. I would love it if Chief changed it so that no matter what, positive is in one direction, negative is in another direction. So we just got to keep in mind here when we're doing something that is considered a crown molding and you put a positive vertical offset, that means it's actually going to move in the negative Z delta, right? So if I want to go positive Z delta, and I put -3, I want you to notice something. It moved up here in our preview. It did not move up here in our preview in the room. That's very important to note. Why is that? Well, according to Chief, we can't move any given molding profile past the ceiling plane height here. And so it won't move up above that ceiling plane height if, and it's based about the total molding size. But there is a trick about this. We can make this work. So all I want to do then is I want to concentrate on this preview right here. This is what's important to me, okay? So you'll see how this works out in just a second. So I'm going to go -1 actually. And then actually, I just want this to go just above this cap molding. That's what's important right now, okay? I keep losing my mouse because, there we go, because I'm zooming. So let's just go negative maybe 1/2 inch. And this is just going to be a guess and check, 1/4 inch. That looks pretty good for me for what I want if I pull a cross-section camera and I'm looking at details. I'm ignoring this other one. In fact, we could put a big offset for that angled cap flashing just so we can see it. There we go. So here's what's happening so far, right? Now that top cap flashing, I need some kind of horizontal offset, just a little bit here. So let's go -1 for there as well. That's looking a little bit better. And then we have maybe 2. That looks pretty dang good. Maybe I want the spacing to be a little bit more perfect here, right? You know, you'll be playing around with these distances, certainly. Or, you know, you could bring up a CAD detail and dimension it all out so that you have some kind of reference. That probably would have been a smart thing for me to do. So let's see, my horizontal offset, I'm going to go -7/8 instead. I'm going to center that up a little bit more, and I'm going to go -2 and 8. Oops, yeah, that worked out. So this looks pretty good. Now, it looks terrible over here in our preview, and that's true. If we were to go take a look at this in 3D, this is what it would look like, not this, okay? But the trick is this. Because we have this really tall profile, and we know we can reference to top instead of to bottom, or uncheck to top, that means we can offset this based on the bottom of this profile. Meaning that this whole assembly, if we were to make it a stacked molding, would reference based on the stacked molding's overall height, which then that means we can shift this whole thing because we've got this larger profile. Show you how this works. We're going to see what happens in the preview once this all pans out. Okay, so the one thing that I kind of screwed up on here is this cap flashing. Both of these, I should just reference to bottom. It's going to make it easier for me to assemble this whole thing, I think. Let's try it. Let's try it without. Let's try it with. So I'm going to shift select all of these moldings. That's all I did. Select the first one, shift, select the last one, right? So shift select all of these. And over on the right-hand side, I get this make stack, okay? And so we can see what happened here. Now we've got this stacked molding, and we've got those different moldings associated with it in that stack. Now, check out what we get to do based on this stack. I want to uncheck to top on the stacked molding, I'm not going to mess with any of these settings if I did this right. So uncheck to top here. It did some kind of adjustment. Now I get to move the entire stack as a whole. Notice we got that wedge up above our wall line, which is perfect. That's exactly what we wanted, okay? Now we're kind of seeing like a mitered end here is why we see a little bit of a return there. I mean, that makes sense because the wall is not blocking this section because we haven't changed our vertical offset yet, okay? And so I think that's pretty cool how they do that. All right, now let's mess around with our vertical offset. Let's just set this back to a base level 0, all right? And so I'm looking at the preview here is what I'm trying to look at. And let's actually make this, what happens? Yeah, so I want to drop this down. So I'm putting in a positive value to go a negative direction. See how that gets confusing, right? Let's go bug our developers about that one. So I'm just doing a little guess and check here. 3.5 inches looks about right. And then I've got to do some kind of negative offset in the X. So we're going to go something like -6, maybe -7. And I probably want to change, obviously these moldings were set up for a different wall type, a thicker wall type. So I'm going to keep messing around with this offset, assuming that we've got a thicker wall type. There we go. And so it's about as good of a preview as I can put together there. All right, so if we go take a look at this, we've got that cant wedge right here. I could have put some additional flashing to kind of lap over at the bottom here if we wanted to. Up to you. Yeah, this is looking pretty good. Let me press OK and see where we're at. Let's go take a little look at this. Isn't that cool? So there's our cant, and there's that little stepped flashing that goes over the top of it. Here's our wedge at the top, right? And we can see inside here. Let's go take a look at our cross-section view now. Look at that. Isn't that cool? So that when we pull this cross-section view, we do a little build all framing, we do a little auto detail, and throw some CAD stuff on top. That looks pretty dang sharp for the most part. I mean, you would do a lot less detailing, especially if I had the correct wall type in here. So what's our next step? Well, we want to get in here and get the materials that we want built out, right? Now I'm going to build a second building here off to the right. And this is just because I want to steal a particular material that I don't know where it is in my library. Bear with me. And let me pause for a second. Let's see what we got going on with the comments. I'm using custom molding trims all the time. Very helpful. Okay. Yeah, I think we might have enough time to go over what I was referring to when I was talking about creating a 3D molding. All right. And then let's see my parapet painter that's got a really cool texture on it here. Better texture than this one is one I created. You guys probably know by now I make my own textures. This was just created from some kind of pebble that was scaled down, so it's got a really good 3D look. Notice this is another example of a parapet wall. Now this is one that I need to fix because you can see here I'm using a 3D molding as the cap and it's not mitering correctly at the corners. So that means you have to go manually place some things. But very cool. Notice I just one click, it applied all these effects. So I'm going to go ahead and paint in this room. In fact, we'll just change it to a room scope. And same thing, I'm going to paint my base molding here, that little wedge flashing. All right. Although I might be incorrect. This would look a little different than this. We might actually have, oh no, that's all right. They would be rolling the asphalt over the top of that. And maybe it would have been nice to kind of take the hard edges out of that flashing that overlaps our cant. And then I've got just like a black stainless steel material that I would use for everything else. Now, if you can't get in here and see, these other moldings in here, I just say, get in here real tight with a little like vector view or whatever, and get into a cut so that you can get into there and paint those moldings. Otherwise, you just got to open up the room, get to the materials tab, and change your materials that way. So this is looking pretty good the way I've got it. I'm liking what I'm seeing. So the next part is just building this into a room style palette. All right. So how do we do that? It's pretty simple, actually. You're just going to select your room, and then in your edit toolbar, which is usually at the bottom of your screen, we have this icon here. So I'm going to use this Add Object to Style Palette. Now I teach this in my classes because there are a few little funny things you can do with this. If you were to say make some adjustments to this, which we are going to do, and so we just want to update a base style palette, something we've already created, then you would say add to existing. Now you're going to notice when I hit create new, it gives us the option to transfer certain settings, very similar to how we might use the object eyedropper tool. And so instead of using the object eyedropper tool, this basically is that one-click action that gets to save to our library, whereas we can't use an object painter from a library. So this is what makes this tool so powerful. So I'm going to create a new this time around, and it's going to bring up this dialog box. Okay. In this dialog box, we have our set properties. Now, it might not seem obvious, but you can just come in here and click on this, and it will open the object, for instance. So I can make edits to my style palette's room straight away from the style palette dialog box. All right. And so keep in mind, I'm editing the style palette right now. I'm not editing the room that's in my plan. All right. I'm going to hit cancel. I'm actually going to come in here and say set properties. And this is where we can set all the specific properties for this particular room. Now, a couple of ones that are really important are wall coverings. Now, Chief just happens to know that this is probably what you're saving the style palette for in the first place, because that's what they built the style palette tool to do, really, is to change the visual display of something. But there's a number of other settings you can get from here as well. So wall coverings, wall material, that's really important to me. Has roof, okay, that's actually really important to me, as well as has ceiling. I want to make sure that this thing doesn't have a roof, doesn't have a ceiling when I spray it, so I don't even have to worry about taking the roof or the ceiling off of something. And then let's see, anything else here? Crown moldings, we definitely need that. Chair rail moldings, we definitely need that. You could keep the floor structure if you're trying to create a parapet where you're always using the same type of floor structure. This is the opportunity to do that. So if you wanted to set this up for, your 14-inch TGIs, or you've got, you want a 24-inch floor truss, set that up in the room, right? We could actually go back to the room and set that up. And then we're going to save that to the style palette so that when we spray this, it changes the floor structure separate from whatever the default floor structure is for your project. Now, if your parapet is, you want to just, I would suggest that you don't change the floor structure if you're building a building where your default floor structure is already correct, because we don't want to override those settings and possibly screw them up. So keep that in mind if you're going to utilize floor structure. And then I've got crown moldings, chair moldings, ceiling finish, base moldings, etc. If I want to, I could do a little search for material and just see what comes up in terms of found properties. And so we didn't get a lot from this. It's basically just the wall material. It inherently will bring forward the molding material, even though it doesn't say that, it will. And so let me just press OK. And so now I have this tool. And so we want to name this tool, out of the box. It's just going to say style palette. So this is my parapet painter. I don't know, we're going to call it number 2. Oh, look at that, I had caps on. And let me press OK. And now I should be able to take this. It's now selected in my library. When you add it to the library, it's already selected. It's the active tool basically. And so I can roll over here and I should be able to just spray this room. And there we go. It's been updated. Isn't that cool? Quick and easy. Now we have this thing that can be detailed in cross-section views very easily, looks correct. And maybe kind of a last little trick here is selecting a wall in 3D and then hitting the Tab or Enter key gets you a new set of edit handles. You're now editing the room height, all right? So that if I knew what the existing room height was here, I could just drag this down by a very specific amount while dragging, hit Tab or Enter again. Polar is checked right now, and so I'm going to change the overall height of this room 76 inches. Really, really simple for me to get to a parapet that I might actually be building, right? So this looks pretty good. Now we've got some time. Please let me know if you've got some comments or questions about this process so far. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to get back to this cross-section view, and I'm going to do what I said I'd try to do, which is mess around with this guy right here. So I'm just going to make a copy of him. I don't know why I'm making a copy of him. This is force of habit. And then in our edit toolbar, I'm going to convert this polyline. And so let me convert this to a 3D solid. Now 12-inch depths, totally fine. This is exactly what I needed. This process is going to be as simple as this. I'm going to press OK. And now I'm going to convert the selected to symbol. Okay. Convert the selected to symbol. We need it to be a molding class. So if you didn't know this, we can convert a 3D object to a molding. If you didn't know this, we can convert multiple 3D objects to one single molding. Why is that important to note? That means multiple objects can have different material classifications with them. We could have exploded this shape. We could have exploded this 3D solid, making it so that we could paint every surface of the solid a different color, and then selected all that and created that molding, all right? So this gives us the opportunity to give us other UV mapped coordinates on one single molding profile. You got to think about that a little bit to understand the full scope of what you can do with that, okay? For instance, I created a sill profile, which is a Rolock brick with a threshold. That's one molding, so it can get applied as a sill. And the other thing that we need to note about converting a 3D object to a molding is we get the parameters of setting some kind of X, Y, Z offset so that the molding, even though it's placed on a particular molding line, could be offset from that line, meaning that we can get a lot of dynamic symbols pushed in automatically into your windows and doors that have specific offsets to take care of unique architectural features. This is getting into the weeds, but I just wanted to, rewatch that, write it down maybe, and get an idea of what you can do with this. It's a very powerful method, is turning some kind of 3D object into a molding profile. Now, I do want to show advanced options. All right, so I'm going to make that check mark and then press OK. And you can see what's going on here. It's repeating itself, but not in the way we want it to, right? That looks pretty messed up. So we are in the 3D panel. Please note that in this convert to symbol dialog box, it looks very different from other symbol categories. Your fixture symbol category, your furniture symbol category, your electrical symbol category. Now the electrical symbol category obviously looks a lot different from other categories as well, because we have the opportunity to specify something as a light. But this one's very different, is we're starting with the 3D panel right off the gate, right? So we can see here, we want to do a rotation in the Z-axis. Why the Z-axis? Because if we take a look in the preview over here, we can see that this is our Z leg, so positive. We're always going to mention this in video because I feel like this is a hard thing for people to learn at first. So all these legs represent a positive direction, okay? Now, if I want to rotate something, we're rotating. I like to think of it as like a trapeze artist, right? So in this case, I want to rotate this as if my trapeze artist was flipping around this Z pole right here. That's his pole, and he's just going to be flipping around like this. All right, so I'm going to rotate this about the Z. So I leave it at 90 degrees. That's fine because you can click rotate a bunch of times. But watch what happens. The way this repeats itself right now, watch what happens when I rotate it 90 degrees. Look, now it's repeating itself in the way that I really want it to, okay? Isn't that funny? Rotate this way, it's stacking them up like a bunch of plates. Rotate this way, and it's stacking them end to end. That's perfect. Now, here's where the magic of this particular symbol is going to happen if I do this correctly. I do want to mention that I've gotten so far into these kind of symbol modifications that I know that there is a known glitch when you get too far into the advanced sizing panel. There is a glitch in here. I don't think we're going to run into it, though, for what we're going to do here. But sometimes if we've got a bounding box spacing update and a stretch plane, there's a glitch that is extremely complicated for them to work out, and they've been working on it for 3 years. All right, so I'm going to put in the stretch planes section, okay, I'm going to put in a height stretch plane. And so we can see here, just by checking this box, we see over here, kind of over in our preview, if I can get in tight here, is that's indicating our stretch plane. That's our cutting plane, okay? So I actually need this to move up like 4 inches or something like that. What does this mean now? That means where that stretch plane is, it's just like a slice. It's going to take that slice, just like we would do a cross-section cut. It's going to take that slice, and wherever the geometry meets at that slice, it will reproduce that same geometry. It's basically like applying a 2D CAD molding. Is that 2D CAD molding exactly the way it works in Chief Architect is we're taking that as a slice and we're repeating that geometry over and over and over again. Right, so that's all we're doing with this stretch plane is we're cutting through that section, and that means when we change the height of this symbol, it will just continue to reproduce at that cut line, okay? The same geometry of that slice. It's really hard to explain that. Maybe I should chat GPT it one of these times. So now that I've got this all set up, the next thing I want to do is I want to get to the materials tab, and where it says concrete, I might want to go select that material that I really want this to be, or I can, usually something that's prudent in this scenario is that you get into your material defaults and you set this up to be your material defaults. So like I could have this automatically be set to whatever the fascia color is for this project, which I'll do for this, that's fine. And then this is just me being a funny little stickler. If you single click in here, you can even name what this is. So you might call it body or molding or whatever. Not really that important, but I don't know, it's an old habit of mine. Keeps everything really uniform. Okay, now that I have this in place, can I just hover over this and replace it? Now, no, it does not toggle replacement mode because we're in a back-clicked cross-section view. If we were to go edit the active view because we're being stubborn and we don't feel like getting out of this view, and I uncheck it back clip, now it might be that I could take that molding and hover over and click and replace. There we go. Okay, so now what's interesting or not interesting about this molding? Let's see if it works the way that I hoped it would. So I'm going to select this room now and open it up. Actually, I'm selecting the wall. I need to tab once. Now I'm selecting the room. I can open the room from this elevation without it being backlit. And so we can see here, here's that molding. Now I should have renamed it something different than that, but there's that molding. Do I get to change its height without affecting its other geometry? Notice that 3D moldings have a very different preview. We no longer see them as they relate to another molding. So keep that in mind. It's a little bit more difficult to place this, all right? But I do think that I get to do something like this where I'm going to say, hey, the height of this is 54 inches. And we notice in the preview, look what it did. Now, in the preview, it stretched in a way that I didn't want it to. So I'm very curious to see if this whole setup worked or if we did this all for naught. It looks like that whole setup did not work the way I expected it to. It did, in fact, stretch a part that it should not be stretching based on that stretch plane. Let's see if we can fix it. All right, so I'm going to get into that library object, open this object. Let me get back to that advanced sizing. I did, in fact, have a stretch zone in the height. It doesn't seem to be doing what it's supposed to be doing. So maybe we did run into that glitch. Just to double check that, I'm going to create a stretch zone, okay? That means we've got 2 points that are going to be stretch planes, and in between those 2 points, I'm going to create a uniform stretch zone between height plane 1 and 2. And so I need this. You can see here in the preview, it's showing us there's our 0-inch, there's our 4-inch. I'm actually going to change this to be between maybe 4 and 12 or something like that. All right. Let me say OK. Let me hover over, click, and replace here. OK. And now let me open the room up and see if I can't stretch this, because this is otherwise we're going to go yell at Chief, which I love to do. Okay, so overall height, let's make this 36 inches again. What is it going to do? Ah, it stretches it again. Come on, Chief, you screwed this up. This used to work. This used to work very, very well, and it doesn't seem like it will anymore. Oh, no. Let's just try that 48, just triple check. Yeah, it's definitely stretching that lower section where it shouldn't be. I think it's hard to tell. Who's got a good eye? Let me just set this back to 12. Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's definitely stretching. Yeah, too bad. Interesting. Well, it shouldn't be. I'll bug them one more time. They got to be getting close to X18 beta, so whatever. Let's see. I see a comment here. Deep in the woods, but I love it even if I cannot see you anymore. Does that mean because I'm so far in the woods, or you actually can't see my camera? Let me know. All right. So I think that's about as far as I would take this video. I feel like we covered quite a bit in terms of, like, you should be able to build a parapet room from this. The last kind of setup for this is if you are someone that's doing these all the time, right? We're doing these all the time. Maybe you might consider making this a tool that's on your toolbars. And then you'll end up with toolbars that look like mine, where it's covered in very unique tools that I've built. So this is how this ends up happening, is build these tools to make my life a lot easier. And then if it turns out that I use them enough times because I'm doing such frequencies in like projects, that's when I'm going to build a tool, add to my library. And we showed that in the last show. We showed it in the last show, in case you want to go check that out. It's really simple. You customize your toolbars. You place a custom placed library object in your toolbar, and then that ends up looking like this, where it's an unlinked tool in your toolbar, and you can click on it. It will bring up a dialog box where you could then link this to what? Well, you could link it to that parapet painter that we just created, and press OK. And it's going to do something about trying to create some automatic icon for you, which is fine. Or you could hit browse to find your own icon and pick out, something that's on your machine that you drew. That's me. I draw all my own icons. So let me press OK. Now we'll notice in my toolbar, there we go. There's my parapet painter. I get to click over this and spray. Simple as that. Very cool. I'll just show you a couple other ones that I have in my system, which is I've got, board and batten. Use this all the time, so that's an important one. It's a 3D looking board and batten. Uses a couple tricks with materials and transparency and stuff like that. So if we click and move the sun around, you can see, that's creating some pretty good shadows. Another very common one for me, for some of my builders, is they want to add shiplap to things. So this is just a wall material region. The wall material region is saved to my library. Then it's assigned to a custom placed library object on my toolbar. Okay, same thing. Some shake shingles. Those look very 3D. Boy, they look almost too 3D. Those look like some really old shingles. And then I do one that's, this is I call this a belly band. Someone else thought that was the funniest name, so it must be a regional name for me. But this would be a belly band for me. It's just some board. So if you don't want to go through the task, if you're just trying to create one of these on just one side of a building, this is the fastest way to do it, as opposed to messing around with moldings and stuff, especially since we got these 3D dimensions where I can click in here and say that this is going to be a 2x8. Very, very simple. And then I get to just draw this past. We talked about this a little bit in the last show as well, because these do miter at the corners as well. So that's really cool. If we didn't talk about it last show, that's because I talked about it after the show with our colleagues together. We always sit there and do a little bit of a review of what we went over. And then my last few are just some funny ones that I find to be novel and used very rarely and probably don't belong on my toolbars, but creating a little bit of a 3D lattice effect, and as well as some ivy where I can use some of our new tools to affect this ivy. In case you didn't know this, we've got those adjust material tools. So just a little tricky getting this selected, isn't it? Yeah, if I wanted to adjust this material, you get to use that interactive material editor tool and then just drag this up to where you need it to be, right? So yeah, kind of cool. All right. All of this coming back to just, hey, let's set up our exteriors so they're as fast as possible. There's some other things that we can do with those room style palette tools. If you didn't know this, my templates do some automatic area analysis. So if I target a room and I go open the schedule from the room, these are a bunch of individual schedules that are worked out to show me area analysis. So if I kind of tile this side by side, then now that you know that style palette tools can change some information about a room, you'll notice this is if I get down and say, hey, I actually don't want this to be considered part of the coverage in my building, I actually have a style palette tool in my toolbar to say, hey, remove the area analysis from this room. And you see here, it just affected my square footage versus adding it back. And you'll see here, it affected my square footage. This is how we can make some really, really simple tools to do calculations for us, right? So this all started in X16 when we got floor defaults. So your default plan can have some stored, we got reportable object information. So we got an object information panel in our floor defaults. This is where you can set up custom fields to do very custom things for you automatically, such as create an area analysis on the fly, or do any number of reportable things that we might be able to get from a room. This is where we get into that kind of power user level, where we're trying to understand what does a room actually report for Chief Architect. And you're going to see here that it reports a ton of information, and it's information you can use to create calculators that are sent to schedules. So this is a very long list of things that it's reporting. So for instance, base moldings. We can see here we've got some kind of a base molding, especially if we were to get to that. Let's get to that cantilever level real quick. We go up a level, select that room. I'm going to get into the object information panel. And this is coming from text macro management. If you didn't know where this is, it's in CAD, text macro management. And I have a custom version of this macro, but Chief Architect ships with an object information macro where you can see the expanded macro value, and it will report all the information for that particular object that you have selected in plan. So we can see here now, we're going to see that cant flashing, right? So what you might notice here is because it's reporting the length of that cant flashing, we could in fact, out of the box, write some condition that said, hey, if there is a cant molding, show me the total linear feet of this in my schedule from a custom object field out of the box. So as soon as I'm drawing, I'm getting something that is giving me a visible display of total length of a molding. And so if you're someone that, it is always quoting something in particular, such as cost a linear foot of molding, you could do a macro that says, hey, per linear foot of molding, it's $2. Report this to my schedule, automatically accumulate the total. And so as soon as we draw a room without doing anything else, we are saying a dollar value on how much it costs for moldings, for instance. How do I utilize this in some other areas? I'll show you real quick. This is just a perfect working example of this. I'm going to just draw a couple of different cabinets here. Let's change one of these to a garbage pullout. Let's change one to a little sink base. We'll throw in maybe a couple wall cabinets. Maybe I'll throw in a 2-drawer full height cabinet. And if we go look at my schedule, we can see here out of the box, it's just giving me a custom cabinet price based on a lot of parameters that I set, and it's giving me box volume. So this is getting into that, more advanced section of what we can do with schedules, what we can do with macros. Let's see, got some comments here. Stretch zones seem to be working better for you. Ultimately, we want to try to avoid the stretch zones because, well, for one, they're not needed. Stretch planes will always work if you have it set to the correct cutting plane. Stretch zones just means we're going to uniformly resize in between a particular zone, but keep in mind that can stretch a material if global symbol mapping is unchecked in the material properties. And so that is me replying to this comment from JT. And can I go over what my Anno tool does? Yeah. Shameless plug. I'm the only one here. I get to run the show. So yeah, let's plug my product real quick. What does the Anno tool do? You can rebuild this for yourself. In fact, everything that's in my templates have so many hours in them that you'll notice that I don't have any problem sharing some of the secrets of how they work, because you want to go spend the time to recreate the thousands of hours I put into them, by all means, do it. I'll show you exactly how to do it, because you'll learn while you're working on that. It's very simple. Every object has information being reported from it. So I'm going to just bring in here a little search tool to show us this is all the information coming from this cabinet. It's a ton of information here, and you can utilize any of it if you do some really basic Ruby scripting. Now, there's some caveats there. Chief Architect has some certain parameters that aren't widely available to the wider web, and especially like your ChatGPT. ChatGPT doesn't necessarily understand how Chief's Ruby works. You kind of have to have a little basis of know-how, a little bit of some parameters, because very specifically, the first thing that I'm going to tell you is that there's a measurement class in Chief Architect. This does not exist in the wider Chief Architect world. I believe it would be called measurement class, measurement method, but measurement class, yeah. And this is that it's utilizing the units that are in your preferences, okay? If you did not know this, you could come into preferences, and under the general panel, the subpanel unit conversions, you can create your own unit. You'll notice here that acre is a custom unit that I created. That percentage sign is a custom unit that I created, okay? Now, when you click on percentage sign, this actually doesn't mean anything. I set it up so that 1% equals 1 foot. That doesn't mean anything. I only needed it to actually utilize the symbol of the percentage sign. But there are other custom units here, such as an acre, where I actually did plug in what an acre is. And so the measurement class can say, hey, we know what a foot is. We know what a square foot is. So we can convert that to an acre using special code. And this comes straight from your manual in the Ruby section, as it will show you how you can convert from one measurement class to another, okay? So because of all these reported values, what you could then do is This is just a text box. This isn't some special object. It's a text box with a macro call that's being referenced. And the reference is coming from this leader line. This is attached. Notice my highlight color there. My highlight is now highlighting that cabinet, so it's attached to this cabinet. So now, because it's attached to this text box, if I don't have it attached to this text box, notice it just changed to pick up what's happening in the room because this text box is placed inside of the room. If you were to move this outside of the room, look what happens. There's nothing to report. Now, if I go take this leader and connect it back, there we go. It's reporting based on a reference, all right? So what my annotation tool does is it just has a macro call inside of it. When you place it in a room, it sees that it's a room. It's got some rule sets built into it for this room, okay? Outside of a room, it recognizes it's not attached to anything. It's going to change its reference as well. Well, sometimes it needs to rebuild and it gets a little glitchy sometimes. There we go. Is that it picks up that this is probably, I'm going to bubble something and say this is an area of work, all right? Now, if I move this back into the room and I plug this into something like this cabinet, it has some base amount of information built into it. It's going to look at what the type is. Based on what the type is, it might report its automatic label. But the first thing that it does always, this is just the way that I set it up, is that it will always look in the object information panel for the AnnoTool custom field. And if there is something here, it will place this above any of the rule sets that I've created, okay? So you can see here, custom forward drawer to center. So if I were to say blah, 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 okay, you're going to see that update, all right? That's pretty clever. So it's just based on what it's connected to, so that if I have a staircase here and I click this to the staircase, it's going to pick up a bunch of information about that staircase. That's because that's what I programmed into it. If I get down into a basement level, it's going to pick up what an overhead clearance is. If I pick up, a wall, it's going to assume 8-inch concrete stem wall footings. Here's kind of another clever one, is if we were to go in and let's just make this a garage. And let's just throw in a little garage door. I find this information to be interesting, I think, to people. It kind of opens your mind as to what you can do in Chief Architect, because there's a lot of things you can do with macros. A lot of times it's like that analysis paralysis. It's like, okay, I get it, we can make macros, but what would I use it for? Check this out. This is a 9'3" block out for the garage door. It just makes my life easier. And it's also limiting my liability from user input error. I say that all the time. That's the biggest selling point for using macros, is we no longer have that potential for typing in something incorrectly. So it's a pretty cool tool. So you can just write a script where you've got some text box that's referencing some other object, and it will put whatever text that you want there. Not only that, I want you to notice something here is, here's my Anno tool. I'm going to have it connected to this right here, and my kitchen tools are built off of style palettes, which we just created for our room, okay? Something we could have saved in the style palette for parapet is we could have been reporting something to the object properties. Let's give this a full swing example, all right? I'm going to get back to my parapet painter. I know we're running over time, but I think this is valuable info. Let's get to this parapet painter. I'm going to open this object, okay? I'm going to open the object here, all right? Object information. And notice that I don't have an AnnoTool custom field. If I am missing a custom field that's in my plan, unfortunately, the only way to work around this is, the reason it doesn't have that custom field is because there was no value in that custom field when we created the style palette. So there's two ways you could do this. You could either create a new field and perfectly match the typing of, in this case, AnnoTool for that custom field so that it's recognized. Or we could go back to that parapet on that second level right here, open this up, and AnnoTool has some kind of information. And so example parapet is what I'm going to put in here. Under the annotool field, I'm going to press OK, and I'm going to hit Add to Object to Style Palette. And we talked about this earlier in the show. This time, I'm going to add to existing, okay? User catalog, there's my parapet painter. It's going to warn me you're about to replace an item. I'm going to say OK. I intended to replace it. It will have all the same set properties as the set properties we had there before. That's good information to know. This time, I also want to include custom fields because I've got a new setting in custom fields. Keep in mind, you cannot target one custom field separate from others. So it's all or nothing. That's really important to note. You can really screw up some systems that you've created. So just keep that in mind. Let me press OK. Now, if I were to have the annotool over here in this parapet, you see flooring to be determined, and I use my parapet painter. If I did this correctly, and I didn't, it should have applied that custom field, and we should have seen this change to that rule. It might be that for room objects that they actually take precedence over that annotool input. That annotool column should say, yeah, example parapet. Looks like I got to go rewrite a code. Thanks a lot. So, for instance, here is I've got a 2-drawer painter. With my 2-drawer style palette, it does bring forward an annotool change. And so when I spray this, we're going to see that that changed this to pots and pans because that's pretty common for me if I've got a 2-drawer base. Just makes life a lot easier. That's going to be it for this show. I know this is a lot of information. Go rewatch it. We love it when you go rewatch these shows. Leave some comments after the fact. You can always see these shows in the live sections in either the Chief Experts YouTube or my Rabbit Design YouTube. There is a live tab. You can go rewatch the live and leave comments there. We get notifications on it, so we'll go respond to you. So if you've got a question, go ahead and shoot that there. Let me mention to you that Dan Bowman's been doing a lot of incredible work on his pro template. I also just noticed that he has a training event. I'm going to see if I can't get that up in a few seconds here because I really need to shut down the show here. Is Chief Experts Architect Training, if you didn't know about this. Let's see. There we go. Master Chief Architect in days, not months. This is on the Chief Architect Training with Chief Experts, or it's on his website, I'm sure. They've got some event January 12th through the 15th in Bloomington, Minnesota. Don't you know, And the last bit of news I'll share is I did just take the Power Users Chief Architect group, which is where we were trying to answer specific questions for Chief Architect and actually delete comments that didn't make sense. That group kind of became stagnant, and we've turned it into a showroom and design showcase and group. So maybe go join that. Chief Architect Design Commons is what this just turned into, and it became a public group. And we've already got another 200 members since I announced this just a few days ago on New Year's Eve. So go check that out. And as always, thank you for joining the show. I'm out of here. I think I'm out of here. It's not letting me end the stream.